Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock. Let's go over what is happening to the market, what we can expect moving into Tesla stock. Keep in mind the market is closed tomorrow and I'll give you my thoughts moving forward. We're in a pretty interesting spot here. So let's go over it. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. And of course, I am not a financial advisor. And if you enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, etc., well, I do share my thoughts with our members every single day. The market is open. That link is down below. You press the join button. $3 a month gives you access to my Tesla tier. $5 includes NVDA. And then of course, $7 includes non-Tesla, non-NVIDIA stocks when I see opportunities or something worth sharing. And over the weekend, I do chart requests on Discord with the tier 3 members. But jumping into it, Tesla. Kind of all over the place here, closing up about 1.8%, closing at 322 per share, which, compared to the market, nice outperformance, right? But this is what we were talking about yesterday on the 1 hour time frame, right? That kind of last chance that I mentioned for bulls, essentially, right? And this was this little, wedge, if you will, arguably a bullish wedge, right? And you can absolutely make an argument it's a bullish wedge, but keep in mind the fact that it's a bullish wedge, it doesn't mean it has to play out in bullish fashion. Like I'm sure, for instance, back here on the daily, I remember a lot of people were saying that this is going to be a very, a bear flag essentially. Where is the drawing here? Right, where we had a massive move down and this is going to be essentially like a bear flag and then we go lower, right? Instead, it went up higher. And I've said this many times, Tesla loves doing the opposite in these kind of situations, right? So just because this arguably could have been a bear flag, if you will, it doesn't mean it has to play out like a bear flag. But, same thing applies here, right? So if we go back to here on the 1 hour time frame, just because this is technically speaking a bullish wedge, right? You can absolutely make that argument that it's a nice looking bullish wedge like this. It doesn't have to play out like a bullish wedge. So in other words, let's talk about what to, look forward to, right? I also switched one of my indicators from the RSI to the stochastic momentum index. Pretty much the same idea in terms of divergences, but it actually has nice signals that I'll every now and then talk about in my video. But anyway, so the main thing to watch for Tesla, this may take some time, right? I'm not saying tomorrow the market is closed. We might not even get the answer Friday. Honestly, we might get the answer next week, Monday or Tuesday, in my opinion, which would be pretty fitting because we also, of course, have the robotaxi's supposed quote-unquote tentative launch. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Elon, I believe he said June 22nd, which seems to be this Friday or Sunday. So if that gets pushed, that absolutely could be what brings it to the south side over here. However, if it doesn't and things go well or whatever the case may be, that could finally bring us to the upside. So in other words, I highly recommend on the 1 hour time frame, you plot this for yourself right here, right now, and let this thing do its thing, right? Let it do its thing. Let it get tight. There's a good chance that Friday pretty much will be this zone right here that we don't really find out just yet. We could still get some sideways action above or below, as low as about 316 to 317 to as high as once again closer to 327 to maybe even 328, right? We could still get one of those choppy days like this, but you can see towards kind of the early-ish part of next week, it could be as early as Monday, could take as long as maybe even Wednesday. That's where we start getting towards the kind of apex, if you will, of this, wedge that we are in. And that's when we most likely will, start getting that kind of tightness into a pretty explosive move up or down, really, ultimately, right? So that's what I'll be looking for as of right now as to, to determine what's next, right? Obviously, if we break above, well, the next level to break will be naturally this kind of 333-ish zone. Break above that, we go closer to, mid to high, we'll say 340s. And then break above that, well, we get a move most likely to 400. However, on the flip side, break under, in my opinion, the lows over here, right? So it'll be, again, depending on how quick it happens, but like about 317-ish. That most likely means that we make our move down lower. If I go back to the daily chart, to the bottom end of this rising channel that we are, very obviously in, which will be a move all the way back down. Again, like I said, about $300 per share, break below that, 270, break below that. We most likely see probably somewhere in the, 230s or so region. That's going to be something to watch for today. So, or not today, but in general, I should say. So that's going to be the main thing I'll be looking at for Tesla stock. Now, going to the daily chart very quickly, right? What are the, potential signals that we have that could maybe give us an idea, if it's good or bad, right? Up or down, essentially, right? Well, again, number one, we have the key levels, right? Pretty much down here, closer to, this general vicinity right here. As long as we don't make lower lows, and that's good, but we need to make higher highs for the bulls and the exact opposite for the bears. So I'd absolutely watch this general level right here, and this kind of potentially today's high actually in the days to come as well. So pretty much that 1 hour time frame I just showed you. But the EMAs, the EMAs are still bullish, right? That is a good sign. The EMAs are still technically bullish. Why? Because the 8 and the 21, the green and the red, they're above the 50. That is a good sign. That does show that, we are arguably still in bullish territory. Now, there are a few signs that are sort of contradicting. And the way I like to look at it, in terms of momentum, right? In terms of like, okay, does the stock really have the momentum it needs to actually make its way higher, right? Yeah, it's going to be bullish EMAs. Number one, like that pretty much has to be a thing. Like that, to me, that's like the number one most important thing, right? Kind of like what happened over here. You can see it started getting very close to that full bullish crossover. And it was pretty obvious it was going to happen, right? That I was talking about before. But here, we're already there. But again, the next thing I want to see is at least one of two things, right? Number one, I need to see stochastic above 60 here, right? If stochastic is above 60, that is a positive sign because that tells me the momentum is, is bullish, right? It's kind of like here where we had that massive move up, stochastic went in here, and this whole time we were consolidating, it stayed up into this green territory as the EMAs got bullish, and we went into the EMAs as well. Like this was probably one of the best looking setups you can ask for in the market, honestly, right? And beautiful play out, right? So, that's kind of that situation that I'm looking for ish, right? So again, we don't have the stochastic over 60, but the other factor, and this is definitely something I'm not a fan of. Again, I've said this many times, but it is of course the MACD, right? The MACD is completely crossed to the bearish side, right? And any pretty decent moves to the upside, it's not really budging too much. You can see it's still pretty much pointing straight down both directions, right? So I'm not a fan of that, right? That's the part I'm not a fan of. I would love to see this cross back to being bullish, but I don't think we'll get a bullish crossover unless we get an actual like large move to the upside. Honestly, breaking the high 340s, which is going to be this essentially this trend line as well. You can see that's rejected as all-time highs. Obviously, is where it started. Rejected as not that long ago over here at the mid 360s. And then if we do make our push up, let's say sometime early next week or something like that, up to the upper end of the spectrum over here, yeah, that's going to push us right into that Fibonacci area I mentioned, the high 340s, but also into that trend line once again, which pretty much needs to break, right? As long as that breaks, well, that's going to be a very, very good sign. That's also most likely what's going to give the MACD a push back to the green territory, which will be very, very bullish, at least in my opinion. And at that point, I'd be pretty convinced that there's a damn good chance we're going to the opposite end of this rising channel spectrum, which will be closer to about that $4-ish $100 range. And that's what I'll be looking for as well, assuming we, of course, get those moves that are not there yet. But, assuming we get those, assuming we beat each level, if that makes sense, 333, 347, if we crack those bad boys, yeah, it obviously further increases the probabilities of continuation to the upside, right? But regardless, I do want to see the MACD at some point flip bullish. I don't think it'll flip bullish if we break 333. I don't think that's enough, but breaking 333 will give me a second trigger point that I like to look for, which is going to be, of course, stochastic above 60. Ideally, we have all three setups like intertwined together and all three are bullish. That to me is the most ideal situation, kind of like what it was here. Like this to me, pretty much the most ideal situation you can ask for. Just to give you an example of what I like to look for, stochastic in the 60s, right? MACD's bullish, RSI or EMAs are very evidently flipping to bullishness, right? Beautiful setup, right? Another example, just to show you another one. I actually shared this with my tier 3 members. I actually ended up missing this one, admittedly. I did miss this one, unfortunately. I was looking at other things. But nonetheless, I shared this with my tier 3 members, how Marvell, for instance, right? Same idea, pretty much exact same scenario. Beautiful push up, stochastic 60, MACD's bullish, and a beautiful bull flag into the exponential moving averages. I was saying 67 down to like about 66/5 is like that, that zone I'd be looking for. Beautiful move. Beautiful. You really couldn't have asked for a more sexy looking move to the upside. And I also mentioned this to coin with our members. Again, I'm just giving you examples of what I like to look for. This was a pretty damn good one right here that I mentioned a while ago. But even this one right here was pretty decent. Now this one was more sus. Obviously, MACD was bearish. Stochastic was in there. But this one was definitely like a nice looking bull flag. I also shared that with my members in Discord. But nonetheless, that's just to kind of give you an idea as to what I like to look for. Like those are the kind of setups I like to look for. But again, if all three of these factors, the EMAs, the stochastic, and the MACD are all flipped to the bullish side, yeah, I get excited. Now I'm excited. I'm like, okay, now this is looking promising, right? This is looking like it's a bullish continuation pattern, and the odds are extremely favored in that is going to be that. We're sort of there with Tesla, is what I'm trying to say. And that's the reason I'm bringing it all up. We're partially there, right? Partially there, but we need to at least one of these others to flip. Most likely the stochastic will be first, above, and that's going to be what I'll be looking for on Tesla stock. So yeah, that's probably the main things I'm looking for right now. Let's take a quick look at Tesla over here. I'm actually looking up Apple is interesting, not necessarily bullish, but if there's a stock that actually looks potentially dippable. Apple doesn't look atrocious here. It does look like it has some level of potentially a small liquidity sweep here. Not really bullish here, but I like the fact that the SMI, which is that new indicator, is right near the historic lows. And this is sometimes what I like to use this indicator for, where you can see every time it's been anywhere near around these zones, it's found pretty, decent short-term, at least short-term bottoms, if not longer-term bottoms. Anyway, that's a different story. So that's kind of what I'm looking for Tesla. In terms of options flow, Tesla stock, pretty mixed throughout the day, right? Definitely pretty mixed throughout the day. You know, some nice bullish flow and bearish flow throughout the day. Nothing really showing me one way or the other. To be completely honest with you, I'm not really leaning in any specific direction. And that, you know, isn't surprising considering I do expect more chop on Tesla stock. I'd be surprised if we decide anything by Friday. I think it'll most likely have to wait until either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday next week. I think that's when we'll most likely get our answer as to which way we're going after this situation. But this, in my opinion, this pattern right here will determine, a very high chance will determine what's overall next for Tesla, potentially for the next several weeks even. Very important. So let's keep an eye on it. But yeah, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow or Friday. Peace.